There's this thing I noticed about myself a while back that genuinely disturbed me. I was sitting in my car, parked, engine off, outside a grocery store, and I didn't go in, not because I forgot what I needed, not because I got a phone call. I just sat there scrolling for maybe 20 minutes, and then I drove home without going in. Now the weird part isn't that I sat in the car. The weird part is what happened when I drove away. I felt relieved, like I'd dodged something. Like the simple act of walking into a grocery store, making small decisions, maybe making eye contact with a cashier, all of that had felt like too much. And retreating to my phone felt like the safer, easier, more comfortable option. I thought about that for a long time afterward. Because that's not the version of yourself you imagine when you think about who you want to be. You don't picture that guy. And yet there I was. And here's what I've come to realize: that moment wasn't random. That moment was the result of something I'd been doing for months without even noticing. A habit so subtle that most people never clock it until they're already pretty deep in. And it has nothing to do with productivity. It has nothing to do with waking up earlier or working out or eating better. It's something quieter than that, something that lives in the small moments. And it's the thing that, more than almost anything else I've encountered, quietly hollows out a person's confidence from the inside. We're going to talk about that today, not in a lecture kind of way, more like how you talk about something with a friend who's actually thought about it. So let's start here. Confidence, real confidence, not the performed kind, isn't really about believing you're great at things. That's a common misunderstanding. People think confidence is something you build by accumulating wins, by getting good at stuff, by having evidence that you're capable. And while that's not completely wrong, it misses something crucial. Real confidence is mostly just the absence of a particular fear, the fear of your own discomfort. That's it, that's the whole thing. People who seem naturally confident aren't people who never feel awkward or uncertain or out of their depth. They're people who feel those things and don't treat them as emergencies. They've learned, often unconsciously, that discomfort is survivable, that sitting in the awkward moment doesn't actually kill you, that showing up to the conversation you're not sure how to handle is actually fine, that the worst version of most situations is still manageable. And here's the dark flip side of that. Every single time you avoid something that makes you even mildly uncomfortable, you teach your brain something. You teach it that the discomfort was real, that it was dangerous, that escaping was the right call. And your brain, being the helpful little algorithm that it is, remembers that. It files it away. Next time a similar situation comes up, it flags it faster. The alarm goes off sooner. The urge to escape arrives stronger. Psychologists call this avoidance conditioning, but honestly, you don't need the technical term. You've felt it. We've all felt it. It's the text you draft and then delete because you decide it's too much, or too weird, or they probably don't want to hear from you anyway. It's the idea you don't bring up in the meeting because you're not totally sure it's good enough. It's the conversation you put off because you don't know exactly how to start it. It's the gym you skip not because you're tired but because you're in a mood and going feels hard today. It's the phone call you let go to voicemail from someone you actually like because answering in the moment feels like too much of a commitment. None of these things feel like big deals. That's the whole point. They're not dramatic. They don't look like anything from the outside, but they add up. Every single one of them adds a tiny invisible brick to a wall that, over time, starts separating you from the version of yourself that acts, engages, shows up, tries things. And the most insidious part, the habit I'm talking about isn't just avoidance. It's something even more specific. Something we do so automatically we don't even register it as a choice. Let me try to describe it. You're bored or anxious or slightly restless. Maybe you're waiting for something. Maybe you just finished a task. Maybe you're in between things. Your brain notices the vague unease of having nothing actively occupying it, and before you've made any conscious decision, your hand is already reaching for your phone. You open Instagram, or TikTok, or YouTube, or your messages, or the news. You're not looking for anything specific. You're just filling the space, numbing the slightly uncomfortable sensation of being with yourself with nothing happening. That's the habit, reaching for escape the moment you feel even microlevels of discomfort. It sounds small, I know it sounds small. Stay with me because this is where it gets important. Your brain doesn't distinguish between big discomfort and small discomfort in the way you might think. What it's actually tracking is the pattern of your responses. And when the pattern is, every time I feel uncomfortable, I immediately make it stop. It learns that discomfort is always categorically something to be escaped, not something to sit with, not something that might pass on its own, not something survivable, something to be neutralized as fast as possible. And now apply that pattern to your actual life. Job interview coming up and you feel the anxiety, you scroll until you feel numb. Difficult conversation you've been putting off, you watch 4 episodes of something instead. A project you don't know how to start. You check your phone 14 times until it's midnight and you go to bed having done nothing. A social situation that feels slightly uncomfortable. You stare at your screen instead of being present in the room. The phone is just the most visible version of this, but the behavior, the avoidance of your own internal discomfort, that shows up in 100 other ways too. The person who always says I'm fine instead of saying what they actually feel. The one who makes jokes to deflect any moment that gets too real. The one who keeps themselves so constantly busy that they never have to sit with any of their own thoughts. It's all the same thing: escape, comfort-seeking, the chronic refusal to feel what you actually feel for even a few minutes. And here's why that matters so much to confidence specifically. Every time you avoid that mild discomfort, the grocery store, the text, the conversation, the quiet moment with yourself, you don't just stay still. You go backward, because your brain has now added another data point that confirms this feeling is dangerous. This situation is too much. You couldn't handle it. Confidence erodes not through failure, mostly. It erodes through non-attempts, through all the things you could have tried but quietly slipped away from, through all the moments you could have been present but retreated from, through every time you treated your own inner discomfort like a stop sign instead of a speed bump. And the really heartbreaking thing is that most people don't even know this is happening. They just slowly notice that things feel harder, that they're less likely to speak up, that they feel more anxious in social situations than they used to, that starting things feels more daunting, that they've started caring more about what other people think, not less, that their world has, almost imperceptibly, gotten smaller. They think something's wrong with them. They wonder if this is just who they are now. They compare themselves to people who seem effortlessly confident and feel like something's missing, like there's some secret they never got access to. There's no secret, there's just a pattern, and patterns can be interrupted. But before we get to that, and we will, I want to make sure something is clear, because I think this is the piece most people miss, and missing it makes everything harder. You didn't choose this, not really. That's not me letting you off the hook. It's me asking you to be accurate about the situation, because being accurate matters if you actually want to change something. The environment we live in was explicitly designed to make avoidance effortless. The apps on your phone spent billions of dollars and hired rooms, full of some of the most brilliant engineers and behavioral psychologists in the world, specifically to make escape from discomfort as frictionless as possible. When you feel slightly restless, your phone is already in your hand before your conscious brain has even registered what's happening. That's not an accident. That's the design working exactly as intended. And beyond the technology, we live in a culture that has gotten genuinely weird about discomfort. We've been sold the idea, repeatedly and from every direction, that comfort is the goal. That ease is the measure of a good life. That if something feels hard, maybe it's a sign you shouldn't be doing it. That you deserve to feel good all the time, and if you don't, something needs to be fixed. Which sounds nice, except it slowly trains you to be afraid of your own experience. It trains you to outsource your sense of okayness to whatever external thing can make you feel better fastest. And that's a terrible position to be in, because it means you're only as confident as your last dopamine hit. You're only as okay as whatever's on your screen right now. The people around you are dealing with this too. That friend who seems to have it together, they're fighting it. The person at work who always seems calm, they have their version of this too. We are all navigating a world that actively rewards checking out and makes checking in feel like swimming upstream. You're not weak for having this pattern. You're human, living in a historically unprecedented environment, trying to figure out how to maintain a self when everything around you is designed to make you forget you have won. That said, and I mean this gently, knowing the context doesn't let you coast on it, because the context isn't going to change, the apps aren't going anywhere, the discomfort isn't going anywhere, so something has to shift, and what has to shift is your relationship with the feeling itself. Here's the reframe. This is the part I want you to actually sit with. Discomfort isn't the problem, discomfort is the signal. Every time you feel that low-level restlessness, that vague social anxiety, that slight awkwardness, that unclear feeling of, I don't really want to deal with this right now, that's not your brain telling you that something is wrong and needs to be fixed. That's your brain registering that you're in contact with something real, something that matters, something you actually care about. You only feel nervous about the conversation because you care about the relationship. You only feel anxious about the project because it means something to you. You only feel awkward in the social situation because you actually want to connect, and connection carries the risk of rejection, and that risk feels real because you're a person who has things to lose. The avoidance response, the reach for the phone, the escape hatch, the deflection, that's you trying to protect yourself from a feeling you've learned to interpret as dangerous. But the feeling was never dangerous, it was just uncomfortable, and there's a massive difference between those two things. When you start to reinterpret discomfort not as a red flag, but as a green light, as evidence that you're in the vicinity of something that matters, everything changes. You're not fighting yourself anymore. You're not white-knuckling your way through anxiety, trying to force yourself to do something scary. You're just following the signal, moving toward the thing that produces the feeling because you know the feeling means it's real. This is what confident people actually do, not magically feel no discomfort. They just have a different interpretation of what the discomfort means. For them, it means, this is worth your attention. For most of us on autopilot, it means, run. We're just trying to update the interpretation. So practically speaking, what does this actually look like? It starts smaller than you think. And I mean genuinely small, not self-help book small, where small still means rearranging your whole life. I mean microscopic. It starts with the pause. The next time you feel that pull, the slight restlessness, the mild anxiety, the low-grade urge to escape, just pause before you reach for the exit. Not for long, even 30 seconds. Just long enough to notice that the feeling is there, to name it roughly, okay, I'm feeling uncomfortable right now, and to just let it exist for a second without immediately trying to kill it. That's it, that's the first rep. What you're doing is teaching your brain, through direct experience, that the feeling doesn't require emergency action, that you can be in the presence of your own discomfort without the world ending. Over time, and genuinely over time, not overnight, this changes your baseline. Your nervous system starts to learn that you're someone who can handle things. Not because you've proven it with big achievements, but because you've proven it with 1,000 tiny moments of not running. And the reps build, because here's the thing about following through on small things. That text you've been sitting on for 3 days, you send it. The conversation you've been putting off, you start it. Imperfectly, clumsily, but you start it. The idea you weren't sure about, you say it out loud and find out it lands better than you thought. Or it doesn't land and you survive that too. The gym you were going to skip, you go, and the mood you were in doesn't follow you in, or it does and you work through it anyway. Each one of those is a tiny proof point, evidence filed not in the resume of your life but in the body of your nervous system. I tried, I felt the thing and didn't dissolve, I showed up, and you can't buy that, you can't think your way into it. You can only accumulate it, moment by moment, by choosing the feeling over the escape. There's another piece to this that doesn't get talked about enough, and it's about what happens when you start actually building this. Because the fear is usually that if you stop avoiding everything, you're going to be constantly overwhelmed. Like you're going to have to feel all of it, all the time, with no relief. That's not what happens. What actually happens is you start being much more deliberate about how you spend your downtime. Because now rest feels like a choice. Scrolling for 20 minutes feels different when it's something you actively decided to do instead of something you fell into, because you didn't know what else to do with the mildly uncomfortable feeling you were having. Choice changes everything. Agency changes everything. You start to notice that the things you used to avoid, the hard conversations, the uncertain situations, the moments of social vulnerability, they're actually not that bad. Most of them, once you're in them, are fine, often better than fine, often the exact things that leave you feeling most alive. The conversation that scared you becomes the one you think about for weeks because it was real. The situation you weren't sure you could handle becomes a reference point. I did that, I can do things. I want to say something now about who watches videos like this, because I've thought about it, and I think it's interesting. The person who clicks on something with a title like this, who sits with a 20-minute video about something as unflashy as a confidence habit, that's not the average viewer. Average people are scrolling past this. Average people don't want to sit with anything uncomfortable, including a video about sitting with uncomfortable things. There's an irony in that isn't lost on me. But you're here, and I don't think that's nothing. There's something in you that hasn't fully given up on the idea that you could be different, that you could show up differently, that the version of yourself that feels a little bit more solid, a little more grounded, a little less at the mercy of the next notification, that version is actually possible, not as a fantasy, but as a real direction you could actually move in. That matters, that's the thing most people have already let go of. People like us, and I genuinely mean us because I'm not sitting here having figured all of this out. I'm in it with you. People like us still feel the pull towards something more intentional. We're still annoyed by our own avoidance. We still care enough to feel uncomfortable when we're not living up to the version of ourselves we know we could be. That discomfort, by the way, that's the signal again. That means you haven't stopped caring, and that is worth a lot. There are a lot of people who have fully settled, who have made peace with the drift, who have stopped noticing the gap between who they are and who they wanted to be. I'm not saying that with judgment. I think it's actually a kind of self-defense mechanism that takes over when the gap feels too wide and too permanent, but we're not there yet. And as long as we're not there yet, we have something to work with. Here's where I want to land. The one habit ruining your confidence, it isn't social media, although social media is involved. It isn't procrastination, although that's a symptom. It isn't negative self-talk, although that follows naturally. It's the decision, made 1,000 times a day on autopilot, to escape your own experience the moment it becomes even slightly uncomfortable. And the opposite of that habit, the thing that quietly rebuilds confidence in a way that actually lasts, is just as simple, just as quiet, just as unglamorous. It's staying, being present for the feeling, not fighting it, not analyzing it to death, just letting it be there while you do the thing anyway. The grocery store is just a grocery store, but also it's not. It's a tiny referendum on whether you're the kind of person who shows up for their own life, even when it feels like effort. I've started going in. Not because I had some breakthrough, not because I fixed myself, just because I noticed the pattern, and I decided the pattern wasn't something I wanted to keep funding. And it's not dramatic, it's not cinematic, it's just a slightly more honest way of moving through the day. You don't need to overhaul your life. You don't need a morning routine or a productivity system or a vision board. You just need to stop treating your own discomfort like an emergency. Over and over and over, in the smallest possible moments, until your nervous system figures out that you're actually the kind of person who doesn't run. Because here's the thing, your brain is always watching you, not judging you, just updating its model of who you are based on what you do. And every time you stay, it takes note. Every time you act despite the anxiety, it adjusts the baseline. Every time you feel the discomfort and decide to be curious about it instead of afraid of it, you're rewriting the file. It compounds, just like the avoidance compounded, the staying compounds. Just like every small retreat made the retreating easier, every small act of presence makes the presence easier. It's the same mechanism working in your favor instead of against you. We're not trying to become fearless. Fearless isn't even a real thing, honestly. We're just trying to become people who have been scared and done it anyway enough times that being scared feels familiar and manageable instead of catastrophic. That's it, that's the whole aspiration. It's surprisingly doable when you frame it that way. I'll leave you with this. Somewhere in the next 24 hours, you're going to feel a small, mild discomfort. Something that would usually send you reaching for your phone or finding a reason to be somewhere else. It won't be huge. It won't be dramatic. It'll probably look totally ordinary from the outside, but you'll feel that familiar pull to exit. Just notice it, that's the whole ask. Just notice it, name it, and make a choice instead of an autopilot response. Maybe you still reach for the phone, that's okay, but now you know what's happening, and knowing changes it even slightly, and slightly over time is everything. We're figuring this out together. That's not a thing I'm saying to be nice. That's actually what this is. A bunch of people who still care, still notice things, still feel the gap. Still think it's worth trying, finding each other and comparing notes. I'm glad you're in that group. I'm glad this is the kind of thing you watch when you could be watching literally anything else. So here's the question I want to leave you with, and I'm genuinely curious about this. I'd love to read what comes up for you. What's one small thing you kept avoiding that, when you finally did it, made you realize you'd been afraid of nothing? Drop it below, because honestly, those answers are more useful than anything I could ever say in a video. Real experiences from real people who are in it, that's the thing that actually moves people. And if you want more of these conversations, the subscribe button's right there. No pressure, but if this felt like something, if some part of this landed, then you know this is the kind of thing we keep making, and we'd love to keep making it with you here. See you in the next one.